So today we're continuing our Chakra 3.0 series. And today we're looking at the sixth chakra, Ajna, our third eye. And the Chakra 3.0 series, if you're new, is a continuation from the 2.0 series, where we began to really vision the chakras in perfection, that the chakras aren't blocked. Like when we think of our sixth chakra, we think, oh, my sixth chakra is blocked. That's why I don't have intuition, I don't see, I don't have that foresight. And the problem with that language is that we believe it's something inside, and I mean, there might be issues with calcified pineal glands, because there's a question about pineal and pituitary, hypothalamus, which one is the sixth and which one is the seventh, and there might be that. But bottom line, our chakras are perfection, right? We each have a perfectly functioning divine energy vortex right here that is the conduit between the seventh chakra, the divine, and all of the other chakras that define our physical experience here. And it's really valuable to internalize the idea that your mechanism for insight is perfect right now. And what that means is, as we walk forward in our healing journey, or we walk forward in our personal expansion, it is fully accessible. It's right there. Inside, we're perfect, and we can navigate from that place. The challenge is, and this is what we talk about in the 2.0 series, is there's this funny world that we live in that really doesn't align with the perfection of the chakras. There's a lot of darkness and lies and dysfunction out in that world, and some call it the shadow world. And that's real. There's real abuse out there. There's real disparity and, power mongering, and it's real. It's not just some mirroring of our inner psyche. Like, it's a really weird world out there. So here you come into the world, let's say you come in kind of naked and open, but you come into a world and there's a hurricane going on. Well, we have to make adaptations. Maybe we have to put a coat on. Maybe we have to strap ourselves down. Maybe we have to take cover. The problem is when we say, oh, well, my chakras are blocked, or my chakra is damaged, or I had this thing and I'm messed up inside, we start to believe that the cover that we took and the coats that we're wearing and the way we're strapped down is actually who we are. And there's nothing we can do about it. We're broken in some way. When the reality is, these are proper adaptations to the world around us, but they're just adaptations. They're not real. They're not us. We can untangle ourselves. We can take the coat off. We can go out in the sunshine. But we have to see that. We have to understand the adaptations. And in the 2.0 series, we talk about how there's sort of the shadow world out there. There's this world of light, which we really are incarnations of. And then there's this interface in between us. And the 3.0 series is all about understanding what's in the interface and how to heal it. How do we actually clear the interface so that we can really access this insight? And that's what our talk is all about today. So Ajna, this is called Ajna in Sanskrit, and it means many, many things. It means beyond wisdom. It means the command post. It's insight. It's perception. It's our connection to the divine, our connection to Brahman, our connection to God. This is Ajna. So what do we want to look at? We want to look at what is in the interface that is not letting us access this clear perception? What's not letting us trust what we see in the world? So the first thing let's look at energy centers, energy meridians. We look at, in yoga, we look at something called a nadi, and an N-A-D-I is how we say it in English. And the nadis are these energy meridians or energy channels that the prana flows through our body. The central one, there's like tens of thousands of nadis, but the three main ones we look at are the Shushmana, the one that runs straight up through the center, and then the Ida and the Pingala. And Ida comes from our third eye, but it comes out our left nostril, and then it weaves through this chakra, and then this chakra, and it goes all the way down. You know the caduceus that you see in the medical field, that lovely caduceus? This is the energy flowing through the chakras up to the third eye. Pingala comes down through the right nostril and goes through all the chakras. So think about that. So this is our sixth chakra. So this is actually the weaving of all of our human experience together. So what I want to do right now is look at each of the chakras and look at the disparity between what we experience in the world and what we actually see through our ajna, to understand why it's hard to trust it and what gets blocked out here in our interface. So now let's imagine, so we go all the way down to the first chakra. So the first chakra is our childhood. It's our first 7 years of life. It's how we fit into the world. It's, are we safe? Things like that. So like, let's say you have a really happy life. You have a happy home. You have loving parents. You have a loving family. I mean, maybe you have siblings that are jerks, but you know, that's normal. Right? But you just live in this sort of happy world. But then you watch the news, and the news says, danger, there's killers out there. If you walk along, you know, someone's going to jump out at you from the bushes and kill you. Like, I mean, I grew up in Toronto, and the number of times you would swear that based on the news, you couldn't walk anywhere at night. But then when you actually do the research, you find out that most homicides happen in domestic abuse, or it's gang related, or it's something like that. It has nothing to do with the average person walking down the street. But what we're taught is this fear. You must be afraid. The whole world's going to hell in a handbasket. Yet your actual experience of it, the sight that you actually are having as a young person, is not like that. Yet the world is saying fear. And then maybe even because our parents are watching the news, they're sitting around the table talking about what they're seeing in the news. And as a child, you're sitting there and you don't even know that you're taking the course, but you're sitting there having this disparity between your experience and what you're hearing. And we don't know that we're taking this course. We don't know that we're learning. All we know is, am I wrong? Is my perception incorrect about the world? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't have clear sight of what's going on. Maybe I'm just a child, but the adults know better, right? What if we're right? What if our perception is true? So for example, and like this is what this ajna is. We have this idea that we have 5 senses, you know, touch, taste, smell, sight, and hearing, right? But what if we have 12 senses? What if we have 100 senses? But these are just the 5 that we look at. What if we really have this 6th sense also that really fills in the gaps and tells us what's really going on? So for example, in the first chakra, We also connect into nature, right? This is our root. This is where we actually connect into the earth, right? So even today, sometimes I look around the world and you hear the news or you hear what people are talking about or people are going through and you think, wow, the world is crazy. Like it's mad. Like it's I don't even know how we can find our bearings. And then I go outside and maybe I go into a forest and I walk through the forest and I listen, right? We think we're listening with our first chakra, but we're actually perceiving through our sixth. We're perceiving the world beyond just the senses and we're listening. And you realize that the earth is still. There's nothing going on. And then you come back into the world and you watch the news or you listen to people talk and you realize this is fiction. What I'm hearing isn't real. And this is where we start to actually say, do I trust my ajna perception of the world? Or do I listen to the world around me and I kind of listen to the nonsense that's being fed? Right? Because there's a lot of weirdness out there. And there's a lot of ideas that are in our heads that aren't real at all, that aren't even remotely real, right? For example, the first chakra is all about abundance. It's all about the fact that here we are on this planet and it is an abundant place. But we are taught that scarcity is the key, right? Mostly because money has been created as a basic tender and then it's sort of hoarded by whoever, right? And we think we're in lack. But the funny thing is, this is all a hack in our brain, again, where it's all in this sixth chakra. Because, I mean, if you went down to the grocery store and grabbed a red pepper and you went home and you ate the pepper and you saved the seeds and you planted the seeds, you would literally have 50 pepper plants, each one giving you 5 or 6 peppers. This world is so abundant. It's abundant in everything we need. Yet that's not the story that's been told to us. And this is what's really important about this sixth chakra, because it can be used as a divine satellite for intuition and perception. But in the physical world, in many ways, this is our frontal cortex. And our frontal cortex can be hacked. And I genuinely believe our frontal cortex has been hacked by school, by the news, by Hollywood, by the beliefs of our family. This has been programmed to believe something that actually goes against our ajna. It actually overrides our divine perception of our lives, our divine perception of ourselves. And again, and it doesn't have to be like, ooh, evil. Like, we don't have to go there. We just have to recognize the programs in the interface that easily could have been inserted into our brains. And I've mentioned this before in other classes, but when I went back to school and I studied psychology, and I found out that 70% of psychological experiments are done by marketing companies in order to hack our frontal lobe, in order to hack this frontal cortex so that we desire something that we don't really need or even want. And this is really, really important. When we think of even watching Hollywood movies, watching TV, watching soap operas, and how these patterns get placed into our frontal cortex, that it's normal to have drama in families, that it's normal to have issues in relationships, that it's normal that there are rich people and poor people, and important people and non-important people, and beautiful people and ugly people. This is not real. There's no such thing as a beautiful person and an ugly person. We're all just people. Beauty just shines from inside, regardless of what we look like, whether we're tall, short, fat, thin, big boob, small boob. It doesn't matter. This is a hack in the frontal cortex. I remember, what was it? I don't know, I can't remember, but there was a book, a really famous book about intimacy. And she said that sexual fetishes, some of the greatest sexual fetishes are the fact when we say something like, well, I prefer a woman with big breasts, or I prefer a man who's very muscular, or I prefer a thin person, or I prefer a fat person, or I prefer blondes, or something like that, that this is actually a fetish, that the person has to look a certain way for me to be sexually attracted to them. This is a hack in the frontal lobe. This is not a physical response. This is not a pheromone response to another human. This is not a soul response to another human. This is a hack in the frontal lobe. This is what happens when something else is in our brain and we're not actually perceiving through our ajna. We're not actually perceiving with our whole being because a program has slipped in there and we're now seeing the world in a very almost two-dimensional way. You know? It's very, very interesting just to recognize it, just to really ask ourselves, am I attracted to this? And then something comes in and says, well, you shouldn't be, or you should be. And you're like, hey, what's that? Right? Because what's really interesting about ajna, you know how I was saying how it's the point of connection from all the chakras, right? Well, all the other chakras are in duality. The third eye, the sixth chakra, is the beginning of us not being in duality. When we hear this perception and we ask a question, we just get an answer. There's no argument. It's a yes, no. Yes, I do this. Yes, I'm attracted to that. Yes, I perceive abundance. Yes. There's no, I don't know, let's argue about it. Let's debate it. Let's look at a pros and cons list. There's none of that. So if all of a sudden our brain is filled with a debate, that's a hack. That's programs that are in our minds. And the challenge is that the energy of the sixth chakra is also our mental energy. So we have this powerhouse of discernment. It's funny that I went to say deception, of discernment in the ajna. But if we aren't careful, if we don't actually access it and trust our divine perception of the world, it easily can go into the brain and become a mental debate, mental masturbation, mental gymnastics. And we just spend all of our life up here in the sixth chakra driving ourselves absolutely crazy. We have the powerhouse of the energy, but we're using it in this crazy place in our frontal cortex because we don't recognize that these are just programs. It's like, I read this book once called Taming Your Gremlins. And they talked about how our brain was like a board of directors filled with these gremlins. And there was the commandant gremlin that said, you're not good enough. You've got to try harder. You got to do this. And there's another gremlin that says, no, I just don't want to. And there's all these, and they're always arguing about everything. Let's imagine that every gremlin in our board of directors, in our mind, in our frontal cortex, is a program. None of them are real. Not one of them. They're all a hack. They're all something we've picked up along the way, maybe from our parents, maybe from Hollywood, maybe from the school, maybe from the church, but they're all programs that have been brought into the holodeck. None of them are real. So imagine part of our healing journey of healing the interface so that we can access this incredible ajna is to, in meditation, when one of those voices comes up into our head, we look directly at it and say, where did you come from? Who brought you here? And maybe you go on a journey and you remember a teacher in school that particularly affected you. And you say, aha, that's where you came from. Yeah, this isn't true anymore. Because this is the key about ajna, is discerning between truth and fiction. Ajna will show us the truth. The world, the shadow world, is full of fiction, and it's been implanted in our brains. So you look at this gremlin in your mind and you say, no, I don't require you anymore, and you're not speaking truth. And you almost just allow it to disintegrate out of your mind. And maybe there's another voice in your head that's frightened because, and maybe you grew up in a home where there was a lot of anxiety and a lot of difficulty, or maybe there was abuse, or maybe there was alcoholism or drug use and things like that. And you really couldn't trust the people around you. So there was someone that appeared in your mind that said, must stay on guard all the time. You never know when the other shoe's going to drop. So maybe in meditation, you sit and you look at that person and you say, is this still true? It might have been very important in a time. Is it still true at this age, in my current situation in life? Yes or no? And maybe the answer is no. And you thank them for their service, and you let them also be released. And then as we go through all these beings in our frontal cortex, eventually we're just left with us. And in every moment, we just listen, and we trust our sight of things, and we trust our perception of things. And on a first chakra level, we trust whether this situation is safe, whether it isn't safe, whether it's a place of abundance, whether it's a place where, this isn't going to work for us, that we need to move on, that we trust it. We don't debate about it. We just just like an animal, that animal primal thing that says, I'm going to go that way because there's water that way. I'm going to go that way because there's food that way. I'm not going to stay here just because I have to, right? To really trust that truth. Then imagine we come up into our second chakra, because what's really interesting is this ajna receives insight all the time. Sometimes it receives insight from the universe. Sometimes it receives insight from our guides, from the divine, from however we understand it. But it's also receiving insight from every one of these perfect chakras inside of us. So in the second chakra, relationships, emotions, things like that, right? Imagine the perfection of the second chakra informing ajna, right? Imagine the connection here. So if we were in our perfection in the second chakra, we would meet someone and we would see them clearly through ajna. And maybe we feel a magnetic attraction to them, or maybe we feel a magnetic repulsion from them. And this isn't personal. Again, the repulsion isn't based on this Hollywood hack that says, oh, I'm repulsed by them because they don't look like Brad Pitt, or I'm repulsed by them because they don't have a job or something. These are all mental hacks. None of this is real. I'm talking about real soul connection flowing in divine perfection. So you meet another soul, and for whatever reason, your soul pushes away and wants to keep walking. All we know is this person is not on our path. That's it. The hack in the frontal cortex doesn't have to get in there and say, I don't like this person because they're loud and they're a jerk, and you know what, and I'm in a relationship right now, and we don't have to go into all of this mental chatter. We can just trust our sight and understand that this person's not on our path right now. There's 7.5 billion people on the planet. Every single person is not on our path. Or maybe we see someone and for some reason we lock eyes, and you kind of realize that you might maybe have known this person for millennia. And there's just a soul connection, and you see them clearly, right? And there's some attraction that says, hey, do I know you? And you have a natural connection to them. But there's a lot of things, again, these hacks into the sixth chakra, this hack into the frontal cortex that says, now, you have to be polite. No, it's okay if they're loud and rude. You have to understand, and you have to not be judgmental, and you have to be nice to everybody. And you do have to be nice to everybody, but you don't have to hang out with them. And you don't have to be married to them, and you don't have to sit beside them at a family gathering, right? Politeness is a huge hack that blocks us from accessing our true guidance system. And this is a real struggle there. The second chakra, our interaction with other people. We have this whole royalty complex that also has been inserted in our brains that says that some people are more important than other people. Wealthy people are more successful and therefore more worthy people. Tall people are more important than short people. Thin people are more important than heavy people. Royalties are more important than the common folk. Hollywood people are more important than people who aren't in Hollywood. Like there is such a curious thing, or that people in a position of power, and I put that in air quotes, are more important than those who aren't. This isn't true. Every single soul on the planet is a soul. Every single one of us is a divine incarnation of God, of consciousness, of infinity. Every single one of us. There is no such thing. But if our second chakra is telling us that, I'm so nervous, that person's so much more important than I am, and your ajna is saying, what? Right? Your ajna knows darn well that they're just a person, just like you. And if they're a star, so are you. There's no such thing as one person is more important than another. Look at in the spiritual community. Oh, that person is so much more enlightened than I am. Oh, that person is, whatever, a master, and I am a lowly, it's not real. And our ajna knows it. So it's a very interesting thing in this second chakra to really honor that, and just to really see this idea. The second, and part of this royalty thing, is this second chakra idea of caste. Like the caste system, which doesn't only exist in India, right? This exists all over the world. That there's sort of this elite class, whether the elite class is based in money or it's based in, these are the priests, these are the royal spiritual ones. And then there's the governing bodies that are the next most powerful people. Then there are the workers, the professional people. Like, think of all the professional people, the people that have gone to school and they're so intelligent and they're so much more important than those who do physical labor. The white collar workers, the blue collar workers. And then there's the people who we don't want to talk about, the unemployed or the addict. This is nonsense. This caste system exists all over the world. That we actually think that there are levels of importance amongst people. And if we have this in our second chakra, and our second chakra is now battling with our sixth chakra, because our sixth chakra, our ajna, is divine sight. And it knows damn well that there is no difference between a person struggling with addiction and someone who works for the government or someone who is part of some pretend caste system. There's no difference. Every person is the same. This is so important. Like how to clear the veil that stands in front of our third eye is we have to discern truth from fiction, because we have been inundated with fiction like this idea that because you have gone to university, you're suddenly smarter than someone who didn't. This is nonsense. Like it's not even remotely true. You might have read more books, but someone else might have had more deep experiences. Who's more intelligent? The person who can regurgitate data out of a book, or the person who has had incredible life experience? And it doesn't even matter whether you've sorted the life experience and come up with great theories about it. Again, like we have this idea that this makes us worthy and this makes us not worthy. But again, our ajna knows that none of this is true. So we just have to look at it. If those programs rise in us that says, I am unworthy, but that person is way better than I am. Or maybe I believe that I'm way better than that person. That I know what's better for them. I have an idea. I'm smarter than them. I'm more enlightened than them. And that's what brings in our Messiah complex and our desire to fix everybody. Because somehow I think I'm better than them. As opposed to honoring ajna that knows that we're all just on a journey. And if I'm called to do something, then I'll do something. But then beyond that, I'm not going to do all this mental gymnastics about trying to sort out someone else's path. And then let's imagine the third chakra, the insights that we could have in our third chakra. And yet, the hack in our brain says, so our third chakra is all about our mission in life, right? What am I here for? What is my design? What is my purpose? And we each have a very unique purpose. So what is the hack in our frontal cortex that doesn't allow the proper insight there? Well, maybe that there are better purposes than others. That maybe the only purpose that is worthy is something that's saving the world, or getting the next Nobel Prize, or going to university, or having a great car, or something. So then maybe our purpose might not be about making money. It might not be about our job. It's that old John Lennon saying where he went to school and the teacher said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, happy. And the teacher said, I don't think you understand the question. And John Lennon said, I don't think you understand life. What if our purpose here is actually just to experience joy? And it doesn't mean we don't work. It doesn't mean we don't contribute to the village. It doesn't mean we don't have relationships. It doesn't mean we don't make money. It doesn't mean any of that. But what if the real driving force of our third chakra was joy, or artistic expression, or love, or who knows, right? But if we have an idea of an ideal third chakra, an ideal career path, an ideal sense of self, this is going to block our insight. It's going to block our ability to see the truth. It's going to block our ability to see our path. Because we have a hack in there that says, no, that can't be it. That's not a good purpose. Like, I'm sure we're more important than that, right? Then we come to the heart chakra. Love. How we receive love from the universe, how we give love. Again, what is the hack in the interface of the sixth chakra that says, yeah, but not you though. You don't get to receive love because, you're kind of unworthy, and who's going to love you that way? And the universe doesn't love you that way. I mean, we've seen that, right? We've seen how rotten it is. Or you're not just going to give love to everyone. Like, what are you, like a Care Bear or something? I mean, people are going to think you don't realize how bad it is out there. Like, how could you just be a beacon of love in a world that's so rotten? You know what I mean? Like, this idea of just being a loving being, we actually may have a mental hack that says, well, you can't live like that though, right? I mean, you have to be a little cynical and sarcastic. Otherwise, obviously, you're not clear about what's going on in the world. Like, what if we could just be a loving being? What if we could just receive love from the universe and share that love out and walk around like that? Does it mean we're naive? Does it mean what? It's an interesting thing to allow the clarity of what's real in the world. Like, what if love is the only thing that's real? What if everything else is made up? What if that's the truth? How much clearer we'd be able to see through ajna, right? So imagine then our fifth chakra here, our throat, our expression of self. Well, so here we have this great insight, but for some reason we're not allowed to share it. Well, that's confusing, right? Like, well, how, if we're told to not share our truth, isn't that strange? Like even, so, where can that come from? That can easily come from church. It can easily come from school. It can easily come from our childhood. That, no. Here's what you have to say. Here's the party line. Here's what you have to regurgitate. Here's what you have to believe. Here's what you have to share with the world. Ajna is saying, but that's not how I perceive it. I know, but here's what you have to say though. Otherwise, people aren't going to accept you and all that kind of thing. And I'm not talking about saying things that are mean. I'm saying just saying your truth. Well, that's not going to get you an A on the test. That's not going to get you into the schools you want to get into. So here's what you should say. We'll talk about a program that says, okay, so I can't actually express through my fifth chakra. Right? You can almost feel the headache, in your head having to do this. Like this is a real challenge. So what are some of the ways that we can get rid of that? Like how do we get rid of all these programs? Besides just simply recognizing them and releasing the programs that no longer serve us. But one of the main things it comes down to is honoring our emotions, our emotional responses to the world. And one of the challenges is because our interface is so filled with all of this fictional stuff that we're supposed to believe, our emotions end up getting very heightened. So if we get angry, we don't just feel, ooh, anger, interesting. That's an interesting feedback. All right, obviously something's amok. Something is in the way here. I'm going to make a different choice. So I'm going to use my perception to make a different choice. Because there's so much junk in the interface. We have anger and it has to bash through that interface. So suddenly anger becomes very scary because we're not using it naturally. We're using it to beat down all of this stuff that we've oppressed. Or maybe something happens and it makes us feel sad. Someone says something and all of a sudden our whole spirit drops. Well, if we listen to ajna, our ajna says, what do I see here? Well, I see someone in front of me who's maybe saying something to hurt me because they're hurting. But if I'm not clear about that in my ajna, if I don't like the feeling of sadness or I judge it as being unenlightened or something like that, I'm not even going to honor it and I'm going to bury it and I'm going to just keep smiling and I'm going to pretend that I don't care. But the reality is, it's opening me up to something that says, wow, this person's kind of unkind. But from this ajna space, we can look at them and say, wow, they're really hurting. We don't take it personally, but we can see clearly what's really going on. And so it's really interesting to start to listen to our emotions from this ajna space. That as we're navigating the world and something happens and we go, whoa, or maybe something makes us afraid and we're like, okay, that freaks me out. And from our ajna space, it's like, yeah, we've got to leave. Tsunami's coming. Time to book it. This is an important insight that we need to really honor. The other thing that we need to do to be able to honor ajna, to be able to honor our true sight in the world, is create new scripts that we say to people. So for example, if we see something a certain way, and someone says, well, how do you see it? And you say, well, this is how I see it. They're like, yeah, but how that can't be true because of this and this and this. And before, historically, if we were playing in the program, we would then engage some part of us and then debate it and say, oh, no, but you have to understand this. And, we would try to make it up and make up all kinds of things to try to let the other person understand it. And I mean, make it up. Because all we know when we listen to this insight is that this is how I see it. There really is no explanation for it. It's just how I see it. It's just my truth. It's just my satya. That's just my perception. And if we have to get into a big explanation about it, we are making it up. We are trying to actually let it meet this other person's need for understanding. So we need a different script. And the script might be, I don't know. It's just the way I see it. Or, I don't know. It's just a call I feel. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going to go with this. So we need to have something different that we say that allows us to stay in this clear sight. Especially if we have a lot of people around us that are really caught in the programs that have been hacked into our brains. And then they're like, oh no, you have to justify it to me. You have to explain it. And that can't be right. And what are people going to think? And isn't that, you're kind of, trying to rise above your station. You're trying to be better than you really are. And, and all this stuff. Like if other people are still caught in all these programs, they're not going to understand. And that's okay. They don't have to be wrong. But it doesn't mean we have to play in that either. We can just be clear and say, I don't know. It's just the way I see it. Another really important way to be clear about ajna is to manifest and make change in our life. Because the point of this is the command post. This is how we see. It's literally our sight, our third eye. This is how we see. And so if you see something, it's important to make it real. Because one of the challenges is, part of this interface that interrupts this is that other people make things happen. Other people make the world happen. Other people make the choices. And we're just sort of victims of that. And we just have to make the best of it. And we don't really have a choice. It's really up to that other person to make a decision here. But what if, so then ajna becomes sort of atrophied. It becomes irrelevant. Like we can have all the insight in the world, but it doesn't really matter because I'm not going to do anything with it anyway. So it doesn't become very strong and it doesn't become very clear. Because one of the other challenges is when we don't actually make choices and manifest things based on our sixth chakra, when we don't actually bring it down into the first chakra and make change, our sixth chakra can then sort of go wild. In the same way that frontal cortex can get hacked, it's designed for imagination, right? In its most positive sense, this frontal cortex is a place, it's like our creative laboratory for the universe. This is where we can play. They talk about the back of the sixth chakra is where we receive insight. And then there's sort of this holding place in the middle where they play. And then we project it out into the world and we create it. Well, what if our frontal cortex is actually that holding space for great insight? So it comes in and we have this beautiful part of our brain that will now play with all of this inspiration, right? This is where quantum physicists do thought experiments. This is where we imagine things. An idea comes in and we ponder it and we chew it up and we percolate it. We allow it to percolate. We allow it to kind of, steep. We kind of think about it. And then maybe it goes off into the universe and it goes away. Or maybe then we go, aha, it has landed. Now I will do the thing. Now I will have that conversation. Now I will open that business. Now I will write that book. Now I will change jobs. Now I will learn French. Whatever it is, that's what the frontal cortex is for. right? For this beautiful creation space. And it's a beautiful thing to kind of take that back. But if we don't manifest, if we just allow it to keep going and keep going, it just becomes a place of fantasy. And then all of a sudden we still don't trust it because nothing is grounded in reality. So the most important thing, if we really want to start trusting our third chakra, our third eye, our sixth chakra, is that when we have insight and when after it's sort of percolated and found its way, then you know what? We make choice in our life. We have the conversation, we do the thing. And then we get feedback from that. And now something becomes very real. So this is where it's really important that we don't get stuck in our heads, that we don't just stay in fantasy. Because as we manifest, get feedback, get new inspiration, manifest, get feedback, that's when our ajna becomes very honed, becomes very refined. And we start to be able to discern between, aha, yes, this works and this doesn't work. It's kind of like the difference between owning a business and never having owned a business. If you own a business, you have ideas, you try them, some work, some don't work, but you start to be able to sense inside when something really does land, when it really is in time, because we're out there doing it. And again, this is one of the hacks that we have to actually look at too, is that, well, what if I'm afraid to manifest? Because what if I fail? What if it's a bad thing? Because we've been taught that there's something wrong with failure. It's like in school, like you can't fail. Whatever you do, you can't fail. You have to get the A every time. Well, if we take that theory out into life and we only manifest the things that we are a guaranteed A for, what are we ever going to do? I've been self-employed for 30 years. And most of the time I didn't get an A in it. Like most of the time. The number of workshops I've planned historically that never ran, that one person signed up for. But you learn, and you're disappointed, but that's okay. And it's like, damn it, I really wanted this to happen and I worked really hard on it. And what did I do wrong and where did I go wrong? But you just learn. So it's really important to get rid of this program that says you're not allowed to fail. Otherwise, you'll never try anything. Because the challenge with the ajna is it's an idea. It's an insight. It's so ethereal, right? It's an energy pattern. How are we ever going to know if it's going to land in the three-dimensional world until we try? There is no guarantee. So that's when life becomes exciting, right? Because you're trying. You got this ethereal thought that came in out of nowhere. Well, you know what? I'm going to give it a go. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't work. Well, that's exciting. Now my heart's pounding. Now I'm excited. Now I'm anxious. Now I'm freaked out. Woohoo, right? This is awesome. Right? This is the true value of anxiety and fear. It's like, I don't know if it's going to work. But it's applied to something real. It's not applied to something we saw on TV or something we heard on the news or something like that. It's real. And it's us playing between our insight and the world. This is very exciting. And this is what really hones our ajna, and it helps to clear the interface. Because we start to realize that, okay, I don't need all these fears in my way. Yeah, and I don't need that program either. And I don't need to explain this to anybody. This is my sight, my satya, my path. And it becomes really, really clear when we start to really apply it in our lives. And I don't know, life gets really, really interesting that way. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day.